Why is it possible that when you stimulate the brain with this simple molecule, it suddenly becomes capable of constructing worlds that have no relationship, that are far more complex than the normal waking world, and yet perfectly coherent and full of these beings? You're not seeing dogs and cats and cows and horses. You are these kind of animals the brain is used to modeling. You're seeing beings that are completely alien, and yet exquisitely to me is kind of a mystery of how is the brain capable of doing this unless it's receiving information from somewhere else or some other kind of intelligent agent.
Welcome back to the Health Longevity Secrets Show, where we push the limits of human potential and unlock the secrets to our health and longevity with your host, Dr. Robert Lufkin.
What if your brain isn't showing you reality, but building one? Today's guest, Dr. Andrew Gallimore, takes us deep into the frontier where neuroscience meets the impossible, DMT, the molecule that may open up an entirely new dimension of existence. Prepare to question everything you think is real.
And now, please enjoy this week's episode.
Hey, Andrew, welcome to the program.
Good to be here, Rob. Good morning.
All the way from Tokyo, Japan, on a somewhat unstable connection. So if we drop in and out, we'll just go with it. And we may edit some, but we'll do the best we can. I'm so excited about this episode. Your background, you're a computational neurobiologist, a chemical pharmacologist, and one of the leading experts on the psychedelic drug DMT. And you're also the author of the new book, Death by Astonishment, so which talks about this amazing drug. So let's dive right in. Let's start with back up, and we're going to start with basics. Kind of, you've said in your book, and that DMT is not just another psychedelic. It's unique. It's unlike LSD or psilocybin in how it affects our consciousness and really, literally our perception of reality. So before we define and dive into DMT, let's take a moment and look at what we mean by perceiving reality, because it is so central to the DMT actions we're going to be talking about. So what is reality, and how do we perceive it?
Well, that's a very big question. I mean, what is answer that question? What I can say is that the world that we perceive, the subjective world, whenever we're awake, or even when we're asleep if we're dreaming, but whenever we're conscious, I think we can say a world to us. We are immersed within a world, and we know that this world is, the structure, the content, the dynamics, the information, all of that is represented within the cortex, within the brain. So the brain is kind of, I describe the brain as a world builder. It builds this model of reality, if you like. That's the only reality we ever have access to, is this model being constructed by the brain, normally as a model of the environment. It's the brain's kind of best guess, if you like, about what it thinks is going on. It's kind of the interface by which we interact with the environment. We never have access to the outside world in itself, what Immanuel Kant would call, the noumenon. We never have access to that. We only have access to the phenomenon.
Yeah, so that
applies always.
Yeah, so that's really at odds with what most general people think of the world is, what they see is real. But really what you're saying is what we experience is just a model that our brain builds from our perceptions and from other things, correct?
Yes. So that's kind of that's your my kind of the axiomatic position that I always work from is that all experiences in some way are built from the same stuff, right? Whether it's a normal waking experience, which we normally think of as the real world, so to speak, but it's built from the same stuff as the dream world. It's built from the same stuff as hallucination. Hallucinations are also built from sea. So it brings me in a very kind of tricky position is like, what's the difference between they're built from the same stuff. Everything's built from these patterns of neural activity.
Yeah, it sounds like it's similar to a friend of the program who's a neuropsychologist and a philosopher near us here is Donald Hoffman. He's written a lot
Mm.
about the dashboard theory of reality and how we synthesize what we see through our perceptions, and seems like that's a sort of a similar model, correct?
Yes, I mean I've been a fan of Donald's work for a long time, and so yes, he informs, and and many others, of course. I stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak. But yes, Hoffman's interface theory, as he calls it, that's exactly what he's talking about. You don't see the world as it is; you see the interface that allows you to interact with the environment.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a fascinating idea that the world, the reality we experience is a combination of our perceptions that we perceive, but then also things from our brain, our past experiences, our expectations, our what we expect, and then
Mm.
and then other factors like we're gonna talk about in a minute. So if our brains are basically reality generating machines, so does that mean
Yeah.
we're already living in kind of a simulation?
Simulation, maybe. I mean, simulation's one word for it. Yeah. I think I prefer the more neutral term model because simulation gets you into, well, you get into simulation theory and the idea that we're being run on a computer, which is an entirely different question. So,
Right, right. So the simulation, to be clear, the simulation is not run by Elon Musk question type, everything reality is a computer game, and that's one kind of simulation. But this is literally a
mm,
simulation that our brain is constructing a reality that we experience based on our perceptions, and that reality will vary literally from person to person. And then, as Don Hoffman talks about it varies dramatically from species to species. And, a
mm.
bat perceives the world very different than we do. They, see different frequencies of light and infrared, and dogs, smell things and all. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
So, it, we're going to talk about DMT and how it affects this reality signal. So and switching the reality channel. So if reality is a channel, before we get into the DMT, I'm wondering just one of our
Mm.
basic questions. Then, who or what is broadcasting the signal?
Right. Well, in the case of normal waking reality, the brain has this model that it's kind of, as I said, it's like the brain's best guess. It's the interface by which the brain or we can interact with the environment. But all the time, your brain is receiving information from the environment that it uses to kind of test and keep this model tuned to the environment. It kind of makes predictions using its model and then tests them against sensory inputs, which gives the brain a good idea whether the model is kind of faithfully or accurately modeling what's actually going on in the environment, basically by constantly sampling sensory. We're talking about the visual world, which DMT in particular is a very visual drug, so that makes sense. But that's all the information that the brain receives is this constant stream of sensory inputs through the eyes that it that it uses to test its model. Now, with DMT, of course, something quite different seems to be going on, which we might want to get into.
Well, yeah, let's get into that. So far we've agreed that modern science pretty much agrees. This is accepted that the reality we experience is created by our brain. All animals do this,
Yeah.
and it's a function of the inputs we get plus other things in the brain that happen and other act parts. So now DMT. So let's talk about
Mm.
DMT. Let's start with maybe DMT 101 because we haven't really talked about it on this podcast much. So you said that DMT is not just another psychedelic. It's unique. So what is DMT and why is it so radically different from other kind of well-known psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD and how it interacts with consciousness?
Broadly, DMT is very closely related to psilocybin. It's, there's one gene different on the molecule. DMT is quite different. Now, DMT, psilocybin, LSD, mescaline, they all fall in this category of molecules known as generally the classic psychedelics. These are the psychedelics that most people are kind of familiar with. I mean, there are hundreds now of psychedelics, both natural and entirely synthetic, but they all do broadly the same kind of thing. They all alter this world model in either a subtle or very dramatic way. So, as I said, the world that you experience is always this model constantly emerging from brain activity. It's constantly being constructed by the brain. And what psychedelics do is they go into the brain and they perturb that model. They bind to specific serotonin receptors in the brain, which effectively stimulates neural activity. It causes these neurons in the brain to become more excitable, to fire more readily, and to share information much more freely between themselves. And so this world model that your brain is constructing, this model that's normally stable, it's predictable, it's kind of working perfectly well. And then this psychedelic comes in, it stimulates these neurons, the world model dynamic, becomes much changed compared to the psychedelic effect. When people take psychedelics, they say, oh, the world they experience becomes more fluid and dynamic, and they become much more sensitive to sensory inputs. This is the effect of a psychedelic, and this is relatively easy. We know now we've got neuroimaging data that shows these effects on neural activity. We know what's happening at the molecular level, the level of receptors and neurons. And so we have a pretty good picture actually of why, if you take LSD or psilocybin, the world seems to shift quite dramatically. It becomes this very fluid world you normally experience. So Robin Carhart Harris, with the world's leading psychedelic researcher at the moment, describes this as a kind of brain activity becomes slightly random, and so it becomes much more loosened up, and that fits with people's subjective experience. But with DMT, something slightly different seems to happen, something more dramatic. The world isn't just kind of altered or changed, or it doesn't just become more fluid or random or anything like that. You actually find that the world model switches completely to an entirely different world model, a world model that has no relationship whatsoever to the normal waking world. But it's not some brain kind of being thrust into completely random activity. This world that you experience under the influence of DMT is an entirely alien reality. I mean, literally, that's what it is. It's a world that is filled. It's highly complex, inordinately complex, higher dimensional, alternate reality, often hyper technological, as if you've entered an alien civilization from a billion years in the future, and it's filled with beings, incredibly strange beings, non-human, non-animal beings that appear to be like alien life forms from another dimension, that are apparently far, far, far more intelligent than humans, and that interact with you and kind of welcome you into the space, and say, look, look where you are, look what we can show you, and they will show you bizarre higher dimensional objects and toys, and perform operations on you, and neurosurgery or psychosurgery or something like this. The whole thing is just, it's baffling and it's confounding because it shouldn't happen. It doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense.
Yeah, that's what I love about your book. I can't recommend it enough for anyone who's interested in this area and want more. And that's one of the unique perspectives you bring to this way of looking at this drug. There's no question. There's general acceptance that DMT is somehow different from the other psychedelics. No, everybody acknowledges that. But you argue and make an interesting point that the DMT isn't just a psychedelic; it's a doorway. And so, what's the most shocking evidence you found that suggests that we're not just hallucinating, but perhaps actually, accessing another dimension of reality?
Yeah, I mean, the world that we experience normally, the normal waking world, this model the brain constructs is one that it's evolved to construct, right? The brain evolved, from the moment you emerged from the womb, your brain world, model of the environment. Any world, it's the only language in a way that your brain knows how to speak, is the language of this reality, the normal waking world reality. And so it's confounding. Why is it possible that when you stimulate the brain with this simple molecule, it suddenly becomes capable of constructing worlds that have no relationship, that are far more complex than the normal waking world, yet perfectly coherent and full of these beings? You're not seeing dogs and cats and cows and horses. You are these kind of animals the brain is used to modeling. You're seeing beings that are completely alien, and yet exquisitely to me is kind of a mystery of how is the brain capable of doing this unless it's receiving information from somewhere else or some other kind of intelligent agent. And that's broadly what kind of I land on, after thinking and researching this for a couple of decades. My current position is that DMT is allowing you, not necessarily, I don't think you go somewhere with when you take DMT, but it is like switching the channel. It's like your brain is given access to, or given access to some alternate source of information that's flowing into the brain. And that seems to be under the control of some kind of intelligence. Because what's remarkable about DMT, and something I describe in the book, is an effect called lockout, which is when somebody will suddenly, somebody who uses DMT fairly regularly, and then one day, just completely out of the blue, they will smoke DMT in exactly as they normally do, vaporize DMT, I should say, just as they normally do, but instead of being, thrust into this alternate reality, they instead they get a wagging finger from some entity that says, no, 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 not today, and they're blasted, or a huge X will kind of fill their fill their field of view with a horrible sound, no, kind of no entry, literally. And then they're pushed back into this normal waking world. So it's like these beings, not only are they able to kind of show you things and basically I say, kind of direct the brain to construct models of reality that it shouldn't know how to construct, but they can actually control whether or not you see anything. It's like they have control of the transmitter, if you like. They're the ones directing the information into the brain under the influence of DMT. And if they decide that they don't want to show you anything, then that's the way it is. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about DMT being more than just a drug with these fascinating effects. So why are they so difficult to explain from an orthodox, neuroscientific perspective? I mean, we have models for radio waves and TV and electromagnetic effects, and you write that orthodox neuroscience can't really explain DMT. So what are the biggest blind spots in current brain science that, and what needs to change for them to question these and understand these?
Yeah, I think we know a lot about not just the way the brain constructs our normal waking world model, but we also know a lot about the way the brain is able to construct models in the absence of sensory information, for example. So when you dream at night, your brain is constructing a world model. In fact, it's doing so in basically the same way as it does when you're awake. And this is because this is the model your brain has learned to construct. So when people dream, and this has been studied for more than a century now, people dreams are effectively continuous with the normal waking world. The brain is using what it learned about constructing a world in the waking state to construct a world in the dream state when it doesn't have access to sensory inputs. And from the phenomenology of dreams, we know that they dream of what the proportion of time they spend on the telephone or watching TV in a dream state, actually, when you measure it, is actually very similar to what happens in the waking state. People dream of dogs, they dream of cats, they dream of horses, they dream of people. Right? This is the most common type of thing for, character in a dream is people, people people you've met a long time ago, these kind of things. So this all makes sense, right? These are the kind of models that your brain has learned to construct. What people don't generally dream about is higher dimensional worlds filled with incredibly alien beings. The reason being, well, your brain doesn't really know how to construct these models. These are completely alien models. There's not something the brain has evolved to construct or learned to construct. When people hallucinate, even with cases of schizophrenia and other neuropsychological conditions where people suffer from visual hallucinations, the vast majority of these hallucinations are normal sized and normal appearing people and animals. Because again, hallucination is simply the brain constructing a model that's it's not properly mapped to sensory inputs from the environment. That's all hallucination is. It's a non-adaptive perception. So all of this makes sense. This is just the brain doing what it's learned to do, which is construct models of the environment, whether it has access to sensory inputs or not. So the question then is why, when you perturb the brain with DMT, does the brain become capable? It's like, I always say, it's like the brain is speaking a language it never learned to speak. It's constructing models that are far more complex, exquisitely complex, staggeringly dynamic narrative complexity of beings and scenarios that not only don't occur in normal waking life, or don't occur in the normal waking world, but could not. These things are impossible. People are describing seeing objects with more than three dimensions. They are describing levels of complexity and detail that simply don't exist in the normal waking world. And so that's really the big question here is why is this possible? Why is the brain this is not easy to explain from a neuroscientific perspective. Why is the brain able to render these worlds, to render these and construct with such crisp efficiency? These aren't suggestions of alternate worlds. These are absolute crystal clarity, more real than real. And yet they have no relationship to the world that the brain learned to construct. So in my opinion, that is not easy to explain. It's not easily to simply pass them off and say, oh, this is just your brain. It's your brain on drugs. This is just your brain making it up. Because in my opinion, the brain doesn't really, shouldn't have the ability to construct these worlds that have no relationship to the world it learned to construct.
And just a clarification too, when we say DMT experience, you're working with fairly purified DMT. Is it safe to say it's a similar experience with ayahuasca and 5-MeO DMT and other compounds like that that contain DMT?
Right. So ayahuasca, yes. So ayahuasca is as you well know, it's an indigenous drink that contains DMT, a DMT containing plant, plus a plant that contains a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which allows the DMT to be orally active. 5-MeO DMT is actually it's a completely different molecule. 5-methoxy dimethyltryptamine is a very different kind of experience. But yes, broadly
Okay.
talking
And
about similar.
one interesting point you make is that I mean, anyone who's ever done DMT or ayahuasca would never mistake it for a dream, like you say. It's completely different. It's not a dreaming experience. It's not like just, oh, I had a weird dream. It's completely unique, and that's the fascinating thing about it. And you've said that the DMT doesn't really scramble the brain, but another way to look at it is it's a precision key that unlocks a hidden operating system. And is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's like I always say, psychedelics, they nudge the dial slightly out of tune. They push the brain into this slightly more fluid, dynamic state, and that matches the experience. But with DMT, it's as if you've suddenly found a new channel. It's like you've turned the dial even further, and then this entirely new channel has kind of crackled and burst into view. So that's kind of, yeah, I think that, and it's like finding a new channel on the TV set and then realizing that the aerial is disconnected, and that's like, where did that channel come from? Yeah.
Well, now let's shift a little bit. We have these questions that science can't answer, that orthodox neuroscience is struggling with. That just doesn't make sense. But you and Rick Strassman are now developing an experimental model for exploring this DMT world in a scientific, controlled, unique fashion that hasn't been done before. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so well, I was working with Rick Strassman. I'm not currently working with him as such, but back in oh, t well, 10 years ago now, 2015, um, myself and Rick, to take a step back a second. So the problem with DMT, well, the problem for most people, it's a mercy. But with DMT, the experience is very, very short. So it's a very short acting drug. Whether you inject it or you vaporize it, it gets into the brain very, very. You kind of break through into this alternate reality, and you're there for 3, 4, 5 minutes. And then you're kind of brought back. So it enters the brain and it's broken down and removed from the brain very, 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 very quickly, which makes the experience like a roller coaster, which is great. It's enough. That's more than enough for most people. But if you want to really study the space, if you really want to analyze and spend time within the space, if you're really interested in what these intelligent beings are and you want to establish two-way communication with them, then you need to be able to spend more time stably within the space. And that's not possible just with vaporizing or with an injection. And so with Rick Strassman, we developed this model basically, which allows us to basically bring somebody into the DMT state and hold them there to stabilize brain DMT levels. So rather than the brain DMT levels kind of rising and then kind of dropping off very quickly, we can try the idea is to stabilize the brain DMT level. And we use a technique from anesthesiology called target control intravenous infusion, which is what they use in surgery. So in surgery, when they kind of put you to sleep, so to speak, they have an infusion machine which delivers a programmed rate of drug into the bloodstream. The idea being to maintain the anesthetic drug at a fairly stable concentration in your brain, so that they can keep you under, in the unconscious state for as long or as short as they need. So they use a very short-acting anesthetic drug. And so it occurred to me, 10 years ago, that why can't we repurpose that technology, but rather than using an anesthetic drug, we put DMT into that machine. And so myself and Rick, we developed this pharmacokinetic model, so a model of the drug's metabolism and distribution of DMT in humans using his data from his pioneering study in the 1990s. He had blood concentration data, and we are able to show in a paper that we published in 2016, kind of a proof of principle that this technique should work. DMT has the requisite pharmacological properties, such that you should be able to use target controlled intravenous infusion and induce someone into the DMT state using this infusion machine, and hold them there for 30 minutes, an hour, or maybe several hours. And that kind of took off. It's become known as DMTX now. We're actually able to implement this in humans. They were the first kind of academic institution to implement this in humans, and show that it worked, that you could bring someone into the DMT state, a deep DMT state, a full breakthrough DMT state, and hold them there in their study for 30 minutes. But subsequent studies have been able to extend this for 90 minutes. And a study, I think, out of Basel, was able to hold someone in the state for like 6 hours. So yeah, it's kind of a dramatic way of being able to dramatically extend what's normally a very short roller coaster into a much longer, more controlled trip.
What are some of the insights that people have figured out from this extended experience that isn't possible with the shorter one? Are there any breakthroughs yet, or how has it changed our thinking of DMT?
Well, we're very much in the early stages. So the Imperial College study was really a pilot. It was really just to show that this is safe and effective, right? People aren't going to die. They're not going to freak out. It's tolerable and manageable and safe. And they were able to demonstrate this, at least for 30 minutes. So that's the key takeaway from the Imperial studies, that this works and that people can deal with it. And as we kind of hoped and predicted, my hope was that as you go into the DMT state, the brain is constructing this alternate world model, and at first it's very overwhelming and disorientating, as you can imagine. But over time, what they found is that the state stabilizes, and so people undergoing this DMTX technology were able to spend time interacting with these beings within the space, for much longer periods. So I can kind of see now we have this project in the Caribbean, which we can talk about. That this really opens up. It's like the difference between free diving and deep sea diving, where you have this line from the boat right to the bottom of the ocean. You can explore around there, not having to worry about your air supply. It's that kind of thing. You once you're able to stabilize the state, then you can send in mathematicians who can look at the structure and the topology of the space. You can send in linguists who can study the language and the symbolism within the space. Theologians, anthropologists, psychologists, artists. You can imagine people with their own specific specialities going into the DMT space, and being able to just spend an hour or two within the space and explore and study these particular aspects of the space. So I think it's an exciting time to be studying DMT, I think.
Wow, that's fascinating. Very, very exciting. I mean, for someone who's, let's say, someone who's never used DMT, and you explained it before a little bit, but how do you even begin to describe the experience? Is what's the closest metaphor for people? Is there anything else that you can add? You've already talked about it a little bit, but for let's say someone who's never done ayahuasca or DMT. Any any other metaphor for that?
All I could say to someone who's never taken DMT is whatever you think it's going to be like, it isn't. I first took DMT more over 20 years ago, and I'd read all of I read all the books. I listened to Terence McKenna's lectures describing it, and kind of thought that I knew what I was going to experience, what I expected, and yet it was completely unlike that. I was instantaneously confronted with what I can only describe as an immense and timeless alien intelligence that was undeniable in its presence and the immediacy of the experience. It was like right there, and it shocked me. You're going to be shocked and horrified probably by this experience because it's unimaginable. It exceeds your imagination in every possible way. So I can describe it all day, and I can discuss trip reports and what people kind of bring back and what they kind of render in the English language, but it's an un-Englishable experience. It is so far beyond normal human experience that it simply completely transcends the imagination. It transcends even the most, the verbal skills of even the most eloquent speaker. It's something that it's so utterly alien that cannot you cannot be prepared for it, in my opinion. It is, but yes, you're going to be confronted with an astonishingly complex alternate world that you could never have anticipated or predicted. And you're going to almost certainly most cases, you're going to be confronted with beings that are beyond the human, beyond the animal, and that appear to be not just more intelligent than humans, but so intelligent and powerful that it's as if you're meeting an alien civilization that's 1 trillion years more advanced than us. And it might be that. I mean, I don't rule that out. that might be what we're interacting with. Is there's some kind of intelligence that has transcended the physical form, that is no longer anchored to material, wet brain and physical bodies, that is actually transcended the physical form in some way. I don't rule that out. I don't say that that's what we're dealing with here, but we almost certainly, in my opinion, seem to be dealing with some kind of intelligent agent of some nature.
The title of your book is Death by Astonishment, Confronting the Mystery of
Yeah.
the World's Strangest Drug. I think that Death by Astonishment is a quote
Yeah.
from Terence McKenna, I think, or um,
Yeah.
and it speaks to the fact that although this is an incredibly powerful drug, it's also a very safe drug. Is that right?
Mm.
As far as side effects or risks of, I mean, the only deaths are by astonishment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody asked Terence McKenna if DMT was dangerous, and he said the only risk is death by astonishment. And he was only being slightly hyperbolic, because a true astonishment, I think, is a very rare emotion. It's become watered down now, and I was astonished by that. I was astonished by the movie, whatever. But true astonishment is very rare. But yes, you will. DMT delivers astonishment on tap. You will be utterly, if you get a good hit of DMT, yes, it's physiologically safe. It's perfectly at home in the brain. The brain seems to be quite happy in the presence of DMT. The brain produces its own DMT. We know that now as well. But the experience itself is going to be shocking. So if you suffer from, if your heart isn't in a particularly good state, and you're prone to, be careful with DMT, because physiologically, yes, it's very safe, but there is, of course, a risk of being overwhelmed by the immensity of the experience.
Yeah, totally. Only use it under supervision, definitely under professional supervision. And so, I mean, you've called this stable interdimensional contact the most important potentially discovery in human history. So,
Mm.
out of your experiments, what signs would you need to convince you that we've actually made contact, or are you convinced already?
Well, personally, I'm very much convinced, but what I try to do in my work is separate kind of private revelation, so my own personal conviction, and kind of rather than private revelation, convert that into kind of more objective, verifiable data. So it's one thing for me to say, oh, I'm so convinced, just take this drug, man. It's going to show you this alien intelligence. And it's quite another thing to be able to demonstrate that. And so that's kind of what I'm interested in is actually, how can we show that this isn't just some extremely exotic hallucinatory phenomenon, but that we are in fact dealing with some kind of intelligence. And I think the evidence is already points in that direction. I was speaking about the how difficult it is to explain the DMT state, and also the intelligence's apparent ability to control access to the space. So they seem to be able to actually manipulate and regulate this flow of information from wherever. But what we'd like to do is actually do some much more directed experiments on the space and on the intelligences within the space. And people have suggested things like, if we're dealing with some extremely advanced intelligence, perhaps we can give them mathematical problems to solve. Right, so we can give them a large number and say, find the unique prime factors of this large number, something that the human brain can't do. You can't do that in your head. It takes computers. So if you could give one of these entities and say, here's this very large number, can you convert this into, can you show us the unique prime factors of this number? And that would be a kind of a test, right? But again, I think the problem with this kind of approach, the idea of us as lowly humans going into this space and kind of saying, oh, prove your existence to us, prove your ontological status, please. It might seem kind of ridiculous. So I'm not sure that's the best approach, with this kind of arrogance that we would deign to go into their realm and interact with these vast intelligences and kind of expect them to kind of play our little ontology games. So I think one thing that's interesting about these intelligences is that they they can't help but betray their intelligence. So the things that they do, the kind of the way that they perform and the operations that they perform, are often seem to exceed things that the human brain can do. So, for example, they will perform mathematical or geometric operations kind of spontaneously in terms of what they're constructing. The way that they are manipulating their own space, right, seems to be beyond what a human could do. So a good example of this, my friend Andres, interested in the DMT space, and he was describing entities that were painting walls within this space, but they were painting walls in a very specific way. They were painting walls using what's called the four color theorem, which is basically the way that you can, any kind of map or any kind of tessellated map of shapes, you can always color that map with four colors such that no two shapes abut each other with the same color. All right. So if you want to do a map of the world, you can always color that map of the world, each country a different color with four colors, and no two countries with the same color abut. Right. And that can, but it's very difficult to do. If I showed you this map and said, can you color this in with four colors, it would take a long time, and it's very difficult to do to get it right. But these beings were kind of painting the walls with these incredibly complex maps of four colors and doing it perfectly, as if they're saying, look what we can do. And of course, most people, when they see this, they would just say, oh, that's incredible. But when you have a mathematician, this is why I was talking about getting specialists in there, because they can say, oh, this being was doing wasn't just strange or beautiful or incredible. It was actually impossible. They were doing things that aren't mathematically possible for a human brain to do. They exceed the ability of the human brain. I think that is the kind of demonstration of dealing with some kind of intelligence is when they do things, and when people can recognize them, specialists can recognize that these intelligences are doing, hitting the space, performing operations that the human brain on its own can't do. So this is, I think, the way that we handle it. We don't ask the intelligences to kind of to do things for us, to cooperate, but in fact we simply send the right people in who can explain, which features of the space seem to exceed something that the brain could do.
We're almost out of time here. I wonder, one thought in the future, do you see a future where DMT exploration becomes something like as common as meditation retreats, or is this something that only a small group of pioneers will ever attempt and work with?
Well, I think it's going to be both, because I think we have this special license now with a government in the Caribbean, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we're actually opening I'm working with a company that's opening a retreat center, also a research center on the island. It's called Eleusis. People can actually go to eleusis.mind.com and they can find out more about it, and they can sign up. So what we want to do is to democratize not just DMT. Hundreds of thousands of people use DMT across the US alone already, but we want to democratize DMTX. So I do see a few options, and again, target controlled intravenous infusion is no joke. When you're infusing a drug into someone's bloodstream over a long period of time, it needs to be done under proper medical supervision. That's actually doing the infusion, nurses, psychiatrists as well. But I think, yes, it's going to be democratized. I think in the future, I will see a time, hopefully, when people will spend long periods of time kind of existing and exploring this incredible alternate reality. I think it's kind of our birthright. This molecule DMT is scattered throughout the natural world. It's not some rare exotic molecule cooked up in the lab of some clandestine chemist. This is a molecule that is it also appears to be it is found kind of kinship, if you like, with this molecule. It's not some random psychedelic molecule, but it's a molecule that's intimately connected with all life. It's found alien physiology. So I think that DMT is this kind of gift. It's this message. It's this key that allows us to enter and interact with intelligences that we don't have access to. Indigenous peoples, of course, have been interacting with perhaps for thousands of years. And we're just go to a retreat center and be hooked up to one of these infusion machines, and spend, several hours maybe enjoying and interacting and learning from these incredibly advanced, intelligent beings. I mean, it sounds very sci-fi, but that's the reality of it, I think.
Well, I can't wait to hear what you and your colleagues discover there. We'll put the link to the show notes to that site, and also your own website as well. And just thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing the time with us. And I think the Wi-Fi held up acceptably well.
It's okay,
yeah. We're in good shape.
Thank you very much. Yes, and of course,
and the
buy
book
book.
is
Yes.
Death by
Yes.
Astonishment, Confronting the Mystery of the World's Strangest Drug. Andrew Gallimore. It's a wonderful book, forward by Graham Hancock too, if you're a fan of him. And I urge you all to get out it. There's so much more in the book. It's really worth it. Thanks again, Andrew, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. I want to bring you back and get the update.
Pleasure. Thank you, Rob.
If you are enjoying this program, please hit that subscribe button, or even better, leave a review. Your support makes it possible for us to create the quality programming that we're continually striving for. Half of all heart attacks strike without warning. Your best early warning? A CT calcium scan. We've made it even better by adding arterial age and liver fat quantification, all from the same scan. Now available nationwide without a doctor's prescription. Use the code Lufkin20 for 20% off. This episode is brought to you by L-Nutra, maker of the Prolong fasting mimicking diet. Use the link in the show notes for 20% off.
One of the most common questions I get asked are which blood tests I check for myself on a regular basis. Well, I check up to 50 biomarkers, but the secret is that I'm able to do everything from the convenience of my home, and I collect a sample with this new breakthrough device. So no more trays full of tubes of blood, needles, or even finger sticks. And you don't need to be a doctor to do it. Then I just mail it in for the results. Cyfox Health makes it possible. Use the link below to get 20% off.
Can I start? Is it recording?
It's already recording.
Oh, sorry. This is for general information and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to constitute or substitute for medical advice or counseling, the practice of medicine, or the provision of healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, or the creation of a physician-patient or clinical relationship. The use of this information is at their own user's risk. If you find this to be on the value, please hit that like button to subscribe to support the work that we do on this channel. And we take your suggestions and advice very seriously, so please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time. You should say that.
No, that's good. That's for you to say it. I think that's very good. Do you like it? You want to do it one more time, or is that good? I think that was good.
Yes.
All right.
You need to save the recording.